This is a monumental day here on Endless Hustle as we invite on six-time UFC champion, MMA pioneer, and Professional Fighters League commentator, Mr. Randy Couture. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, man. How's everything going?
Things are going actually very well. So we're filming this on April 30th. 10 years ago today, you fought your last MMA fight in front of 55,000 people in Toronto. Have you taken some time today to reflect on your incredible career and how that sport has changed your life, or are you not sentimental like that?
Yeah, I definitely thought about that this morning. It popped up on my timeline. There was a picture of the stadium that night with my big old mug on the big screen TV above the cage. It was pretty crazy night. It's crazy. It's been 10 years already. Man, it's been.
Does it feel like it or no?
No, it's gone so fast. Action-packed, nonstop 10 years. This last year might have drug out a little bit. It was a little slower than most, but man, it's been an amazing ride for sure.
What are your thoughts when you look back on Randy Couture 10 years ago? What do you think of that kid?
Well, I still didn't have hair. Yeah, no, I don't know. I've been so many ups and downs and been through so much, not just in the 14 years fighting. Obviously, it's a volatile sport. Everybody talks about, oh my gosh, 6 world championships. I'm like, yeah, that means I lost it at least 5 times. And the truth is I lost it all 6. So, I think that those are important lessons though. I mean, it's not always about winning all the time. It's about how you respond to the adversity of losing, of being knocked down and picking your butt back up and getting back after it, making the adjustments you need to make. And I'm more proud of some of those losses than any of the wins, honestly. So, and I think that's a perfect example of life and what life is all about.
After you stepped away from the octagon for the last time, I know you signed with Bellator shortly thereafter, but did you experience any difficulties, identity difficulties, seeing as a big portion of your adult life was wrapped in this competition and admiration? Was there any reinvention hurdles for you there?
Well, fortunately for me, I've been through that kind of transition a couple of times. I walked away from military uniform after wearing that for 6 years. Thankfully, I had college to walk right into and focus on my college career and the chasing the Olympic dream. When I left fighting, I had acting. I could, focus my energy on the businesses that I built through the years I spent as an athlete, and then, opened the door of acting and movies, and really kind of focused on that stuff. And that gave me a new purpose. One of the things obviously I do is work with a lot of veterans. And I know that the transition period for a lot of our veterans is a huge struggle. The statistics speak for themselves. We lose 22 a day to PTSD and suicide, and transition is a huge piece of that puzzle. So I've heard that story very, very many times, sitting in the circle with a lot of our vets, opening up and talking about the things we struggle with. And this certainly wasn't a cakewalk. It took me a while to come to terms with, the feeling and the thoughts in my head that it was time to walk away from the sport. And I was happy that I did it on my own terms. I didn't have some doctor, professional promoter, telling me I shouldn't do this anymore. I was still competing at a high level, still felt great physically. I just felt like it was time to move on. And I think that's probably a rare thing in our society, but I'm happy with the way it went down. Thankfully, didn't have really any struggles in the transition period. I just started focusing that mindset and that competitive nature on getting acting jobs and getting better at that skill. So it's been fun.
So I have so many Expendables questions, because whenever you get that type of crew together for a movie, I don't know that there's ever been a cast assembled that if you were to put all the testosterone together, that it would be that high a level. How did that all happen? How did Expendables happen for you?
Yeah, fellas, you need to be careful taking your wives to that movie, because they might walk away pregnant. Yeah, it was an amazing experience. Definitely one of those pinch me moments. And I don't think just for me, I think for a lot of us involved in that cast. I remember the first time in Expendables 1, we're in Brazil. we all come together around this well that we're going to ascend into to get into the tunnels of the palace. And we're all supposed to synchronize our watches. And we're all just looking at each other like, man, can you believe we're all standing here doing this together? And I think even the crew was a buzz. It was just a crazy moment. And then in Expendables 2, it obviously got elevated to a whole new level. We're in Plovdiv. We're getting ready to trash this airport and shoot at Jean-Claude Van Damme. And it's cold outside. It's October. So we're all in these tents. We're getting our gear on to go out and shoot this scene. It's me, Bruce Willis, Chuck Norris, Schwarzenegger. I mean, it was a ridiculous group of people standing in this tent. And we're all just kind of looking at each other in this surreal mindset of like, man, are we really here? Are we really going to go shoot Jean-Claude Van Damme right now? It was pretty crazy.
Oh my God.
Do they geek out over you, Randy? Because Schwarzenegger, Stallone, but they do it for play. That's all fake. You did it for real. Were they kind of geeking out over the people that you got to knock the fuck out?
Well, they were definitely big fans of the sport. I think probably the guy that questioned me the most was Steve Austin in Expendables 1. You know, we'd get picked up by the van at the hotel to go to set, and we worked nights that whole film. So we, 5 o'clock, 5:30, they're picking us up, and we had about an hour ride out to Metairie to the set where we were shooting. And he would just ask me a million questions. He knew all the stats on all the fighters. I swear, if he was 10 years younger and his knees were better, he would absolutely be fighting. He was a huge fan. But obviously, Stallone's a big fan of fighting, boxing especially, but MMA as well. And I think that's why I got the call to be able to be Toll Road in that movie. So there's a great group of guys. The only other guy with any real fighting experience was Dolph Lundgren. Obviously, in Kyokushin Karate, he did a lot of that the karate competitions and still competed. We sparred a little bit at one of the promotional days. It was fun. He's a great big guy, man. It was a blast.
Who was the most alpha of the cast? Who was like the alpha?
Well, I think Stallone sets the tone there. I don't think anybody's gonna act up, be a diva, be dramatic on that set. When Stallone just sets the pace. He's the only one that can pull all those guys together that has that kind of juice. And so I don't think anybody wanted to cross him or get out of line with him running the show for sure.
Randy, I don't want to put you on blast here, but Jay Glazer said a couple of years ago that Chris Pratt hits harder than you. Can you confirm or deny this allegation?
That definitely sounds like a Glazer statement. I've had the pleasure of training with Chris a bunch of times at Unbreakable in LA. Honestly, got to train with Chris when he was in high school. He came to a summer wrestling camp at Oregon State University when I was coaching wrestling there. And I just happened to call a big kid out of the crowd to demonstrate technique on, and it was Chris Pratt. So obviously that was long before Chris Pratt became Star-Lord and all the other stuff that he's done. But Chris is an amazing guy. I have a lot of respect for him, and he's still got it. The guy can wrestle. He's a very, very good wrestler. He's a very tough guy. So it wouldn't surprise me a bit that he kicks harder than I do.
I feel like there's probably a little known fact that you were up for a role in Guardians of the Galaxy, and because you beat the shit out of Chris Pratt when he was in high school, you didn't get the role.
No, that's not how it went down. I did read for a role, and it went to Dave. And I think honestly, Dave's physically a little more fitting for that role. But I've read for lots of roles. That's the competitive part of this business. Is you are literally competing with a lot of other guys for a big role like that. And there's a lot of guys coming in and reading at the same time and auditioning at the same time for a lot of those films.
We just had GSP on the show, and he's on Falcon and the Winter Soldier right now. And it's mind-blowing to see all the MMA guys making this move to Hollywood. Have any reached out to you for advice?
I haven't really had anybody ask me for advice. Shannon Rich, who's a pretty well-known MMA and kickboxer, is making his way into stunts, especially, but doing some acting. And he's reached out to me recently to kind of, if I see of any projects that he'd fit in, to let him know. But none of the other guys, I obviously just popped up on my news feed a couple of days ago. a picture of me, Chuck, and Tito on the set of Cradle to the Grave, which was 20 years ago, I believe, 20 or 21 years ago. And that was mine and Tito's first film. Was an amazing experience and definitely created my interest in the process of making movies and trying to become a better actor. That was the first outing for me. So interesting how all these things have come together. You know, I was training with Cesar Ferreira, a Brazilian kid, back in that fight with Lyoto Machida for Toronto for my retirement fight. And I got to commentate for Caesar's fight last night in the PFL. It was pretty cool. And it happened to be on the eve of the anniversary of that fight, of me retiring. So pretty ironic that I'm, 10 years later getting to commentate about Caesar's fight. He looked phenomenal last night too, by the way. He had a great knockout in the first round. So, everything comes around full circle.
By the way, I love Cradle to the Grave, and we just lost one of the greats, and you got to work with him on the movie, DMX. Yeah. What was DMX like during that movie?
Well, what a shame, first of all, to lose such a guy in that manner. He's such a talented guy, and you just never know what other people are struggling with, when you pass them by or you work with them. I didn't actually have any scenes with DMX. I did work with Jet Li. I had that one fight scene with Jet Li in the movie, but DMX wasn't in any of those scenes in the underground fight scenes that me, Chuck, and Tito were all in.
You were a pioneer in an era of fighting that, wasn't nearly as lucrative as it is today. PFL champions at 6 weight classes are getting $1 million. Are you surprised that there are different promotions cropping up that can pay fighters such an enticing salary?
No, I'm not surprised at all. I think there's plenty of room in the marketplace for all these promotions. It's a great time to be a fighter, to have all these multiple outlets to go out and ply your wares. If you can't get a fair shake with one promotion, there's a good chance you'll get a fair shake with somebody else. And I think promotions like Bellator and the PFL are reaping the rewards of some of the things that are going on in some of the bigger promotions.
One of the leagues that I've actually become a huge fan of is the Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship. I mean, that is excitement to the extreme. What do you think about BKFC?
It's pretty interesting. When I first saw it, I'm like, how in the hell did they get that? Any athletic commission to get behind that. Obviously back in the early days in the UFC and MMA, we used to fight with or without gloves. You didn't have to wear gloves if you didn't want to. And a lot of guys chose not to back then. And then at some point when we unified the rules, they made a unified glove and everybody had to wear a glove. The common misconception is that gloves are made to protect your opponent. They are not made to protect your opponent. They are made to protect your hands, because there are a lot of small bones in those hands that break on somebody's head, because the head is very hard. So it is very interesting. Obviously I've seen Chris Lieben, Chris Lytle, Paige Van Zandt recently stepping into bare knuckles. Shannon Rich is someone I just mentioned. He's been doing some bare knuckle fighting. I enjoy watching it. I think I'm pretty happy with MMA and allowing me to be able to use my wrestling skills and not just get into a pure striking battle.
We actually had Chris Lieben on the show. Man, he is an intense dude. He is awesome.
Yeah, Chris is a great guy, obviously. One of our guys from the old days back at Team Quest with me, Matt Lindeland, and Danny Henderson, Robert Follis. We had an amazing crew of guys in there. And there were some amazing guys. I mean, that room, you could have sold popcorn to those workouts for quite a few years there. I mean, it was a who's who of some of the best guys in mixed martial arts at that time.
I got another rumor that you may dispel or accept. When you were having a heart attack, did you try to foam roll it out?
You've been talking to Glazer again, haven't you?
No.
Yes, that actually happened. I was, I worked on Tuesday on Outlaw Johnny Black with Michael Jai White. It's a Western that should be coming out here pretty soon. So I'm riding a horse, having a great time on Tuesday. I've got Wednesday and Thursday off. So I go to Unbreakable to train like I always do. And I'm in the middle of the workout and I'm feeling like crap. I'm like, dude, I just worked out Saturday. What the heck? Why do I feel so crappy? And I had this weird ache. I thought, man, how did I pop a rib? had this ache that wrapped from my back all the way around, and I've popped my ribs before. It was different. It was duller, but it wouldn't go away. And so I, finished the workout. I get the foam roller. I'm trying to roll my ribs out and make this ache go away. It won't go away. So I get changed. I drive home. I get to my house and I'm like, babe, there's something wrong. This ache won't go away. It's very weird. I've laid down for 10 minutes. It just won't settle down. Let's walk over to the hospital and see what's going on. I'm 3 blocks from Cedars-Sinai, which is one of the best hospitals for cardiac issues in the country. So we walked the 3 blocks over to the emergency room, and I had to sit down, wait my turn. They get me in, they put me on the EKG, and man, when they hooked that EKG up, you'd have thought it was NASCAR. They were ripping my clothes off, had me on a gurney, rushing me upstairs. They're like, "You're having a full-blown heart attack." I'm like, "What?" My girlfriend Mindy's eyes got real big. She thought they were going to crack my chest open and go in. It was really crazy.
Didn't they say the pain? Didn't you say it was like a 2 out of the pain scale, and they were like,
I think it was a 3. Yeah. Glaze asked me. Actually, the doctor asked me, and Glaze was in the room. He's like, "Don't ask him. He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about." And of course, it felt like about a 3 to me. It wasn't that bad.
Meanwhile, for any normal people like us, it's probably a 12.
It was a weird situation for sure. I had no idea I was having a heart attack. I just thought, something wasn't right for sure.
Wow.
I'm just glad it happened there, honestly. I mean, the month before, I was hiking up Yosemite Falls. I was dehydrated as hell, and dehydration played a role in that scenario of having the plaque rupture and creating the clot. So if I'd have done that up in Yosemite, I would have been toast. There was no way I would have gotten the medical attention. So it happened where it's supposed to happen. And it was, things worked out. Let's just put it that way.
Randy, I wasn't sure what to expect from you, but you have a really great personality. So I can see why you're an announcer now. How has the transition to broadcasting been?
Well, I enjoy it. I feel like we as fighters have a very particular perspective that we get to share with the viewers that are fans of our sport that maybe don't see some of the subtleties or understand some of the technique that's going on when they're watching guys in the cage competing. And so I think that's something that we as athletes, as commentators, get to pass along. It's something that started with me in the UFC for a couple of years there. And now I'm really happy to be involved with the PFL. I love their format. I love how these fighters have stepped up and everybody's, chasing their dream, trying to be the best in the world.
The Randy Couture story series on ESPN, you were dubbed as a massive overachiever. Do you view yourself like that, or were you always kind of confident?
I was really happy that they did such a great job pulling that story together and telling that for me. It was really, really well done, and got a ton of positive feedback. And it's hard to explain, honestly. It's not something I ever saw myself pouring into and fighting, but I think I've always kind of been wired this way. The military certainly accentuated that. I fit right in. I took to the military mindset like a duck to water. And I feel like I'm a cat. I've lived about 7 of my 9 lives. I think I got 1 or 2 left in me. Each segment of my life has been very unique and very interesting. I've made a ton of great friends and met a ton of amazing people on this journey. I'm very, very thankful.
I want to talk to you about nutrition because I'm fascinated about just intake, how fighters and elite athletes have to eat to make sure that they're in top shape. What was your nutrition regimen like and your eating regimen like?
I tried to keep it pretty simple. Obviously, as a heavyweight, I could eat pretty much whatever I wanted. I didn't have to worry about cutting, and I'm certainly not a big heavyweight. I walk around at about 222 for most of my career. So making 205 wasn't a big challenge for me, but that's when I realized I needed to change my eating habits. I wanted to keep my strength. I didn't want to suffer cutting to 205 and ended up affecting my endurance or my strength. So I started doing a mostly whole foods diet, stayed away from processed and fried foods. I hadn't drank a soda in 25 years. I just stopped drinking soda altogether, focused on high alkaline foods, staying very hydrated, and eating whole, good foods. It's pretty simple. Most of us know what good food is and what shit food is, frankly. and you know, it's not rocket science. So keeping it simple. I was never one of those guys that was going to pre-prep all this food for the whole week or measure anything, count calories or any of that stuff. I just tried to keep it pretty simple. And obviously through working out twice a day, most weeks, 6 days a week, you could get away with almost anything you wanted. So when I retired, I knew I couldn't get away with all that anymore. And I started doing the intermittent fasting. Read a lot of articles and a lot of medical studies on, obviously obesity in our country is a huge issue. So doing the intermittent fasting really fit my schedule. It's simple. I still try to eat good whole foods in that 6-hour window that I eat during the day. And the rest of the day, the other 18 hours, I'm not eating any food. Still drinking liquids and stuff, but I'm not eating any solid foods. And that's allowed me to stay lean, stay in shape, and not turn into a fat bastard, frankly.
What does a Randy Couture cheat day look like?
Well, you know what? I just ate at Wahlburgers. it's they have one of those here at the hotel at Oceans Casino in Jersey, where we're at for the PFL. And I've seen them on TV. I've never eaten in one. So I just ate at Wahlburgers. I had a root beer float, and it was amazing. I can remember winning the state championship my senior year in high school, coming home from the tournament. And I asked my mom, I said, I want a liter bottle of root beer and a half gallon of vanilla ice cream. And I put the whole half gallon of ice cream in a bowl, and I just started pouring root beer over it and sat there and ate the whole half gallon of ice cream after winning the state championship. So
what were you going to the
I've had an
electric
affinity for root beer, huh?
I said, what were you going to the electric chair or something?
Yeah, my last meal.
Yeah. Randy, you faced some MMA legends in your career, Chuck, Tito, Brock. Who do you think was the most mentally tough fighter that you faced? Just a guy willing to suffer.
Man, I think they all had their moments. I think, that first fight with Chuck, I think he broke more than anything. But I think it was a valuable lesson for him. And I think obviously from that point on, he kind of came into his prime. He stepped up and really kind of dominated the weight class, I think, for the next 4 years. Tito was another one, very mentally tough. I felt him on the edge of breaking a couple times during the course of that 5 rounds. Had him in some pretty rough spots. And I felt the frustration build in him, and he just would not give it up. He would not quit. And that's a sign of somebody who's mentally tough. There's been some other guys that broke. Obviously Vitor, the first time I fought Vitor, I feel more than, I've never been a knockout puncher. It's more of an accumulation or battle of attrition type of a fighter. And that was certainly the case with Vitor. It wasn't that I knocked him out. I just felt him break. It made him work harder than he wanted to work. That's how you physically, mentally break somebody. And I think there was a couple guys in a couple fights that was the case. Certainly Gonzaga comes to mind, Pedro Hizzo, and I fought Pedro twice. And the first fight was a knockdown, drag out, definitely toughest fight I was ever in. And by the way, that was the first fight my mother ever attended in person. And I did not walk right for 6 weeks after that fight, man. He beat my leg up and broke my nose. It was a tough fight. But, I don't think he ever really recovered after that second fight we had.
I was actually going to ask you, because obviously coming off this last UFC with Chris Weidman just shattering his leg, and then the fighter recently who lost his finger in the ring. What's the nastiest thing you've ever seen in the ring?
Well, I've seen that leg break 5 times throughout my experience in MMA. So that's since 1997. I've seen it 5 times. So it's pretty rare. What's crazy is that Chris Weidman has been on both sides of 2 of those 5 times. I saw one of those at a Tough, I don't know if you're familiar with Tough Enough. It's an amateur show in Vegas. My son, Ronda Rousey, a lot of great fighters have come through Tough Enough. And I saw a break there that was when the kid stepped back, he didn't know it was broke yet, and it compounded. And that was pretty gnarly. That's probably the worst one I've seen, honestly.
Oh, that's awful. I mean, you just think, how do you even come back from that? How do you walk normally again after that?
Yeah, well, thankfully the human body is pretty resilient. I mean, some might say that Anderson Silva never really returned to his full capabilities after the break with Weidman, and people are questioning that with Weidman now. I think he's going to heal up just fine. The real question in my mind is how much spirit does he have left to continue to grind out camps and put himself out there in the cage. I think that's a lot more of a factor at this stage of Chris's career than suffering through the leg break and the recovery.
There are rumors that Jake Paul is going to fight Daniel Cormier in a boxing match. Are you following Red? Or
Oh my! I would love to see that. Daniel would smash him. Oh my gosh! Why does he pick a real boxer?
People thought
Ben
this
Askren's not a real boxer. Daniel Cormier is a damn heavy-handed wrestler, but he's not a real boxer. If he steps in there with a real boxer, he's going to get a rude awakening.
Does it drive you nuts to see these YouTube stars who think that you guys train for this your whole life? You've been in wars with these people, with other fighters, and boxers have had the same thing. Is it driving you nuts that these guys think they're anywhere in the class of the elite athletes you guys are?
Honestly, it's frustrating. And it's an indication of honestly where our society is at now, that we keep making these knuckleheads famous. And that's how I feel about it. There's a lot of them out there. To be an ass somehow makes you popular these days, and it shouldn't be that way.
Randy, before we get you out of here, one of the reasons we started this show was to talk to successful people like you and figure out how you continue to elevate. So my question to you is, given all that you do, what habits or mottos do you incorporate in your life to ensure you continue to elevate?
Well, for me, it's always been check your ego at the door. You're doing any of this from a position of ego, it's only going to get in the way. It's only going to trip you up. I believe in starting with humility, acting with humility, and end with humility. With that mindset, every single person I meet is better at something than I am. And with an open heart and an open mind and acting with humility, I get a chance to learn what that is and learn from that situation. So I always try to start with humility, act with humility, and end with humility.
Randy, I want to ask you about a couple fighters. The first one I want to start with is Francis Ngannou. What do you think of him?
I'm very, very impressed with Francis. He's an amazingly humble man, a very gifted physical man. I've watched him this last year a lot closer than I had in previous years. I've seen the work ethic. I've seen him dig in and try to shore up some of his potential weaknesses, mostly his wrestling and his abilities on the ground. And I think we saw how far he's come in that last fight with Stipe. He's really, really putting together some amazing skill sets. And I've been just very impressed with his humility and just how he is as a person. Pretty amazing story that in 2012, he was literally homeless and trying to make his way to the US through Europe. And now here he is standing at the top of the heat in the heavyweight division for the UFC. Pretty remarkable.
How about Kamaru Usman?
Usman's amazingly talented. I haven't trained or met the man, so it's hard for me to say what I think of him. I shook his hand and looked him in the eye. So I love the way he competes. I think he's a dynamic, diligent fighter. He seems to have his conditioning in order. I'm not seeing him get tired at all. He's got a great gas tank, and he's very, very technical. So you better strap it on if you're going to face that guy.
And then finally, Conor McGregor, of course.
I'm a fan of the way Conor competes. I like what he does in the cage. I'm not a very big fan of some of the antics and the stuff outside of the cage. And I'm not just talking about the publicity stunts that we've all witnessed. And unfortunately, just like those YouTube guys, we seem to be rewarding this type of behavior and not cracking down on some of that nonsense. So, I saw where he recently just donated a whole bunch of money from his whiskey to youth in the community where he lives. He does things like that really make me want to like him. Never met him, so I can't judge the man. I think until you shake a man's hand and look him right in the face and get a real sense of who he is, it's hard to comment. But we've all seen the publicity stunts. We've all seen the inklings of some of the other stuff that's gone on. I think there's some issues there. Where there's smoke, there's fire sometimes. And I think he's definitely got some lifestyle issues that are possibly affecting him and getting in the way of his continued success in the sport.
Who's the guy today who reminds you the most of you in your prime?
Of me? Oh, gosh. I think the guy that I feel like I share a warrior spirit with the most has been Michael Chandler. I think he's a humble guy that puts in the work, is diligent, and goes out there and tries to represent himself and his family in a positive way, and the sport in a positive way. So if I had to pick somebody out, I think it would be Mike.
That was awesome. You're awesome, man. I had no idea what to expect, and you're really great. You're welcome back anytime, Randy. Congrats on the new PFL gig. And, you know, I really love what they're doing there. I've been watching. I love, like Matt had mentioned, the tournament style. People have to fight each other. You want to see the best fights, and I love how PFL's approaching it.
Thank you. And we're really excited about the format. And you know, they sharpened the pencil a little bit more even this year from the first 2 seasons in cutting it down to 10 athletes and 4 that get into the postseason playoff for a shot at the title. I think it's a unique take, putting in a true sports format, which I think is really cool. And I'm excited to be part of it.
And don't forget to check out the Randy Couture story series on ESPN, the 4-part series. It's produced by PFL, if I got that right.
Correct. We took 2020 off because of the format. It didn't make sense to try and do kind of half-assed one-off fights and discredit the format we spent so much time and money to build. So I kind of agreed with that decision. Now, obviously, we've come back with season 3 in 2021. And in that off year, they decided to create a production company, do some vignettes and some things on a lot of the athletes in the PFL. And they asked if I would be willing to do one on my career, which I was honored that they chose to do that. So pretty cool. And they did a great job. Josh Fowler was amazing. Traveled all over the country to meet with a bunch of my people, and he just did an amazing job.
I have one last question that I forgot to ask Randy. Did you ever think about going over to the WWE?
You know, it never appealed to me. They never approached me. I think because of my amateur wrestling roots, it just felt like it didn't fit who I was or what I wanted to do or be. There's a ton of MMA guys that do it. We just saw Tom Lawler, compete last night in the PFL, and he's been doing New Japan Pro Wrestling. Seen Don Fry, Mark Coleman, Kevin Randleman, Josh Barnett. There's a bunch of MMA guys that love pro wrestling. I get the appeal, but it just never really tickled me. I was never that interested in it, to be truthful.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was fabulous, Randy.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you guys having me on.